interpreters in Iraq and also getting Afghani interpreters and refugees here in safety to the U.S. and helping them to navigate the process of entering this country. This is important to us for a few reasons. One is that Steve is Betty Ebel's son. So when Betty asks me to do something, I try to do it. So, that's first reason. Two is that, as many of you know, my family is affected by the immigration process here. And when we were working on our visa application, which felt like another full-time job on top of this, I looked at my wife and I said, I want to do what we can to make this process easier for other people who are trying to do it. We both are university educated, we speak English, and I have a job. So for people who don't have those resources, I cannot imagine how difficult it is to navigate the process of entering this country. So Steve's going to talk with us about that a little bit. The third reason is that we're a church, we believe in Jesus, and Jesus said, whatever you do for the least of these, you do it for me. And that includes especially welcoming the stranger. So Steve is going to talk with us about ways that we can help him do that and how his work does that. Before you go, Steve does have books in the back that you can buy and he can sign. There's a donation basket for an organization that he will tell you about that helps support refugees coming to this country, especially interpreters. So he'll tell you about that as well and how you can give and where that goes. Also, separately from Steve's organization, but through the deacons of our diocese, we're collecting coats for refugees coming to Maryland from Afghanistan. And we thought this might be a good evening to kind of get those together. So we have 2 black trash bags in the back with coats in them. So put your coats there if you have an extra one. And in the coming weeks, we'll still have those. So if you come on a Sunday, bring a coat along and help out a needy family that's coming to the area. So just a word or two about who Steve is. I've already given you his most important qualification, but here's a little more technical ones. So Steve Miska retired as a colonel after 25 years in the Army. His last assignment was teaching graduate students for 3 years as the Army chair at Marine Corps University. Previously, he served in the White House as director for Iraq on the National Security Council. And in 2007, on his second of 3 combat tours, Steve led a team that established an underground railroad for dozens of interpreters from Baghdad to Amman to the United States. He earned top academic honors as counterterrorism fellow at the College of International Security Affairs and has taught economics at the United States Military Academy, West Point. Steve routinely speaks on First Amendment issues and soft networks. He has addressed DIA, RAND, the Pacific Council on International Policy, the Young Presidents Organization of LA, and numerous media outlets and think tanks. He holds degrees from Cornell University, National Defense University, and West Point. He and his wife of 29 years have 2 children and reside in Southern California. So please welcome Steve Miska.
Thanks, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out one of my children is back there at the book table as well, Rob. And I'm always super grateful for the support, not just from family, but from volunteers around the country with a lot of the nonprofit work that I do. So it's really important. And as Father Nathan pointed out, we've got 2 special guests here. Actually, I was seeing if there were others, but this story in particular is relevant to this community because of the role that the church played in welcoming an Iraqi family, and that's chronicled in the book. And so Madame Betty and Mr. George are both here. That's what the Iraqis called them, Madame Betty and Mr. George, and that's kind of, you can imagine what kind of adventures occur when a family with 5 children, an Iraqi army general, and his 2 wives move into your house for a couple months. chapters at the end of the book that go into that aspect of the story. I'll let you know just a couple housekeeping things. You can go get a book at any time if you want. The proceeds support the U.S. Veteran Artists Alliance. They are a nonprofit based out of Los Angeles that supports aspiring veterans who are either writers, some sort of artist, they might want to go into film, and they're trying to do screenwriting. The cover art was done by an Air Force veteran. She lives in South Carolina through that nonprofit. So they're just very big into supporting veterans who are trying to move into that process. 2/3 of the book are set in Iraq, with a little bit in Amman, Jordan. And then the last third is back here in the United States. And I'll give a little bit more flavor to why that is. But I thought it was important to tell the story of what it was like for those lucky few who actually made it here to the United States, and the sponsors, these amazingly courageous women in general who open their doors and welcome them in, and what that experience was like. And so the last third of the book really focuses on that, and it chronicles Betty and Mr. George. It chronicles a widow named Madonna out in Tucson, and also Leah, who was an immigrant herself, who came from Brazil, and welcomed her husband's interpreter while her husband was still deployed. And she was raising 2 small children at the time. So just the crucial role that sponsors play is really important. So Father Nathan mentioned a little bit about Afghanistan. That's really why I wrote this book. I resisted writing it for quite some time. It's based in mainly 2006 and 2007 in Iraq at the height of sectarian cleansing. And what happened was any Iraqi who was working alongside Americans like me, they were being targeted by everybody from Al-Qaeda to Jaish al-Mahdi, Shia militia, to sometimes members in the police force for the Iraqi army. And so I realized as my interpreter started being filled out from underneath me that we didn't have good policy to insulate them. And I felt like I couldn't look myself in the mirror unless I tried to do something about it. And so my team started trying to figure out this Byzantine bureaucracy that you alluded to of what was then a new immigration system. It's called the Special Immigrant Visa. And it was created specifically for interpreters in conflict zones and broadened to others who are working alongside us. And so anyway, I had my staff start trying to figure it out. And it took us 3 months just to process one packet. And I had a full staff of people working on it. Not just one, father from the church trying to get through the system and take on another job. And we were in combat. It was very kinetic at the time. There was a lot going on, but we felt it was important because as veterans, we live by an ethos of leave no one behind. And we think about it as our fellow, servicemen and women who we're going into harm's way with, but it becomes bigger than that when we're there because we realize how vital our interpreters, our other local national partners are, how we can't do the mission without them. They're our cultural eyes, ears, and mouthpieces, and they help us do less damage in many cases, and I'll share a bit of that with you on that. But Afghanistan and what's going on in Afghanistan right now is why I wrote the book. And since April, when we made a decision to withdraw, I got involved with a So I mentioned how valuable interpreters are, and this snippet comes from right up front from one of the characters in the book, Ronnie. And even today, so all the interpreters, because it was so lethal, they use a nom de guerre, a combat nickname. So that because if you know their real name, you can figure out where their family lives, what tribe they're from, and you can start targeting their family. And they use nicknames even amongst each other because they don't want somebody to inadvertently slip. Many of them never told their family what they did. They made up alibis. And so here's one of those fantastic. Ronnie began his job with the Americans when he was 18. The son of a university English professor, he learned the language well and became proficient by practicing with his father and watching American movies. He wanted to make Iraq a better place, and the Americans paid well. However, he knew better than to tell anybody about his employment, not even his own family. 8 months after he started work at a base called Camp Banzai, Ronnie was home one evening. His mother called that dinner was ready. Ronnie walked into the kitchen and found her folding a pile of laundry. "What's this?" his father asked in English, holding Ronnie's U.S. military base access badge. Ronnie stared at it, stunned. "Your mother found it in the laundry. Luckily, she was not sure what it was." "I can explain," Ronnie said. "You don't need to. Your mother and I just want to make sure that you're safe. What would we do without you?" "Of course I'm safe. I translate documents in the office all day. Very mundane work, but they pay well. All a lie, of course." At that time, the Americans didn't issue interpretive body armor or helmets, and Ronnie patrolled every day. He was so naive to the risks that he wore his college clothes, white pants, and a nice shirt on his first patrol. He learned in a hurry from other interpreters how to mask his identity. In 2004, when the Americans asked him to replace an interpreter named Samir, they didn't tell him how Samir had died. Ronnie thought it happened on patrol, but felt prudent to ask. Only then did he learn that Samir had been killed leaving his house. Ronnie's father said, "We appreciate that you helped provide for the family. Please be safe." It was impossible to tell if his father knew he was lying, but Ronnie understood he had to make some changes. He attended nursing school in the evenings. He wore his hospital scrubs to and from work, a useful alibi. People who had time on their hands to observe his comings and goings could plausibly believe that a hospital employee worked long hours. The disguise allowed him to leave early in the morning, change on base, and patrol with the Americans. After his shift, he changed into scrubs and go to nursing school, and late at night returned home. Ronnie arrived on base one day and found his lieutenant in distress. The previous day, the officer had made a severe mistake while reversing his Bradley armored vehicle. He crushed a minivan loaded with Iraqis. People died. Others were seriously injured and evacuated to a hospital. The interpreters were all talking about it. One of them described the incident to Ronnie. So when the lieutenant asked him to come, he surmised it had something to do with the accident. "I've been ordered to compensate the families of those who were killed or injured," the lieutenant said. "We're going to the hospital. You know where it is?" Ronnie hesitated, then said, "Can I make a suggestion?" "That's a very bad idea." He wasn't sure how his input would be received. He was new on the job. The Americans were just getting to know him. "I know it's a crappy situation," the lieutenant was angry and pacing. "I don't want to go to the hospital and deal with bad American families, but I have to give the families blood money to keep them from seeking revenge. The U.S. military made frequent salacious payments to compensate grieving families for injury and loss." "I understand blood money," Ronnie said, "and you are right about that. However, Iraqis are very emotional people. If you go That's a great question. It's a challenge, right? And there's a lot of cultural learning that goes on. Yes, ma'am.
So you alluded a little bit, and Nathan did also, about your foundation. Can you tell us more about that?
So I'm affiliated with a lot of foundations. So what I would just say is, if anybody wants to make donations, I would just ask you to do it to the U.S. Veteran Artists Alliance. But if you really want to, and focus on any Afghans here in your community, and the resettlement organizations that will be active here and other nonprofits that are local. I represent so many nonprofits. I mentioned there's over 100 in the Baghdad or Allies Coalition. I'm on the steering committee for the coalition. And if you've got a specific interest that you would like to donate to, please ask me, because there's a lot of need out there. But I think I always feel like it's always more impactful, especially if you know you're going to be receiving Afghans in your community, to see the results. And so I would recommend really making donations here. And I know Father Nathan is involved in helping lead some of that, or probably a lot of other leaders in the church. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Your story mainly takes place 10 years ago, longer than that. You have a wonderful description of Hassan and Baby and Ronnie. Do you stay in touch with them?
Yeah. Great question. So can everybody hear the question back there?
No.
So this gentleman asked if I stay in touch with some of the interpreters that are chronicled in the book. And I've been in touch with all three of the ones that you just mentioned. So we got about 3 dozen interpreters out of Baghdad by the time I was leaving. 6 of them, when they got here to the United States, immediately enlisted in either the U.S. Army or the Marine Corps, and then some of them deployed back to combat as American servicemen. So that's the character of folks that we're talking about. These are people I trusted with me on patrol every single day. I gave them weapons because it was so lethal. Everybody needed to defend themselves. And so we were going out the gate multiple times a day, a lot of times, and interacting in some dangerous areas. So Ronnie and I communicate most frequently. I get asked to be an expert witness in asylum cases for people at risk of potentially getting sent back to Iraq. And a lot of times I'll reach out to Ronnie and we'll communicate with people on the ground in Iraq to get a better understanding of the security situation now and how it's changing. And he's an incredible human being. And when he finally got approved for his visa, my soldiers didn't want to let him go, even though they knew how much it meant to him. And his story is absolutely insane in terms of how hard it was for him to leave. So it won't be too much of a spoiler, but he didn't want to get here to the United States and have to depend on anybody, even though he knew he would have a sponsor. So he decided to stay in Baghdad, as dangerous as that was, so he could save up enough money to be independent when he arrived here. And so he had saved up $10,000. He had his visa all approved, and his room caught on fire, and all his money, and his visa, and his passport, and everything burned. And so he had to start over again. So, but that is, that's one example of the types of folks that we're talking about here. And he was such an incredible human being. Hassan, Well, that's a real spoiler right there. So, of the 5 children, the oldest daughter is bringing her 2 babies now to visit her American grandmother, or their American over Thanksgiving. And so my wife and I and the kids are going to fly in as well. We're looking forward to catching up. Yes, sir.
Was there any criteria for leaving Afghanistan? Did you have to have a special immigrant visa, or anybody that wants to leave the country could just get around from the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, was there any criteria for leaving Afghanistan during the evacuation? And what I will tell you is there was a bit of luck involved in that. And I'm sure if you saw the news, outside of the airport, it looked like a zombie apocalypse storming the gates. And you probably saw photos of aircraft taking off with people hanging on the wheel wells. And am I getting too far up? Uh-oh. PTSD, Jim. First, I got in trouble with Madame Betty because she told me I was supposed to shave before I get to the degree. Does she tell you that too?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so on your question, though, it was unbelievably complicated because we waited too long to start the evacuation. And we didn't have the right structure in place to do it properly. So what happened was you had a lot of well-meaning people. We had to surge 5,000 troops back in to secure the airport and to clear the airport. And then we had to rely on the Taliban as outer security to allow the people that we wanted to let into the airport in order to manifest them on aircraft and get them out. And so it made it an extremely just gut-wrenching experience. And I'm just talking about the people like me who was 9,000 miles away in Los Angeles trying to help somebody get through that chaos and get through a gate that may or may not be guarded by British paratroopers or American paratroopers, and how do we let those soldiers know who the right people are that they're supposed to be taking. It was really bad. And then because we're so wired in with the environment, we knew that the Islamic State, Korangal, was going to conduct an attack, which happened. And even though it was about 5 days before the end of the August 31st, which our government had decided was the end date for the evacuation, for all intents and purposes, the average Afghan, that bomb ended the evacuation for the average Afghan. The only people who were getting through the gates after that were American citizens and green card holders. And there were some very selective operations that went out to get people that had been working with our intelligence community, and we were doing a lot of other things. But because we waited so long, we being the U.S. government, the entire veteran community activated. And you had veterans raising millions of dollars, chartering aircraft from third countries, coordinating the air overflight rights, the landing rights, and getting these planes in, getting them loaded and manifested with vetted special immigrant visa applicants and others that they were focused on, and then flying them to third countries somewhere. And what that ended up doing was seriously complicating everything in a lot of ways. It was well-intentioned, But that's part of the reason why the veteran community now is coordinating with our State Department and Department of Defense, is because you're trying to do a legal process in our immigration system, but when people get paroled into the United States, that they don't have a legal status. They're on these 8 military bases here. 3 of them are in Virginia. They have no legal status, so they qualify for 0 benefits, and they have nothing because they had to leave with the clothes on their back. And so anyway, we're in the process of trying to work through that. But I'll give you one vignette to show you how complex it gets. There was a gentleman here in Maryland, Afghan, who applied for asylum, and it was approved. He's still here today. His wife and his 2 daughters were fortunate enough to make it inside the Hamid Karzai International Airport, get on a charter plane, and fly to Doha in Qatar. So that's where one of our government evacuation sites is, the 3rd countries that we'd fly from Afghanistan to Qatar and then on to the United States after the processing took place there in Doha. Well, this family did not go via the U.S. government evacuation. They got out some other way, and so they were in Qatar at by the hospitality of the Qataris, and they had given them a 30-day visa. Well, at the end of their 30-day visa, because Qatar isn't a signatory to the Human Rights Convention, they were getting sent back to Afghanistan. And luckily we found out about 2 or 3 days before their visas expired, because I've been running an operations center 24/7 since August in LA, and my team specializes across the entire evacuation pipeline from Afghanistan to 3rd countries to here in the U.S., connecting people who can help each other work through these challenges. So my colleague, who's an immigration attorney, was able to verify through Citizen and Immigration Services here in the U.S. that, oh yes, the mother and the 2 daughters, their asylum cases had been approved. But the paperwork, the CIS didn't know where to send the paperwork, because it had been approved when they were in Afghanistan, and there was no longer an embassy in Afghanistan. So I got on the phone to my colleague, who's the ambassador in charge of all the refugees in Doha, and I asked her, can we keep this family there? Is there a way to prevent them from going back to Afghanistan? Because if they go back, it's exponentially harder for us to help them. And so we were able to get the Consul General of the embassy involved. She helped to get the interview process going, and Diplomatic Courier got the case files finally transferred out there. And it looks like we're close. We don't have this family completely reunited here yet. But I think the last hurdle is going to be they need to clear any fees that they've rung up during their stay with the Qataris. And that includes a fee for every day you overstay your 30-day visa. So there's going to be a fairly stiff bill in order to get them out of the country, but that's what a lot of these veteran groups are doing. They're raising the funds to intervene in cases like this. And so that's just one example, and I know you're living a lot of that in the what I would call the routine immigration system, but it's anything but routine. It's extremely frustrating, and it's not designed to deal with the type of crisis that we saw unwind in Afghanistan.
Were there a significant number of non-SIP people?
There were, and so American citizens and green card holders were prioritized, and then special immigrant visa applicants, especially those who were far along in the process. So the special immigrant visa is a 14-step process. And if you want to laugh and cry at the same time, John Oliver did a 15-minute segment on how bureaucratically insane this process is. those who are far enough along were the first ones that got manifested and put on flights. But there are still 20,000 applicants who remain in Afghanistan. And that's just principal applicants. When you factor in their family members, you're talking 75,000 to 80,000 people who are at risk because of their service alongside of Americans. So anyway, we are working with the Taliban to help gain their cooperation, we being the U.S. government, and attempting to find safe passage for a lot of people. There's those who are high enough targets, we can't do that under the auspices of the Taliban. Any former commandos who were targeting Taliban or ISIS folks, any others are ones that you just can't. We're not going to get them out on a commercial aircraft. That's not going to happen. And so we've got to help them find safe passage across a border somewhere, and then work through whatever country's immigration system we get involved in the border countries. So anyway, thanks for that question. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I want to thank you for giving of yourself to write this book. I know it must not have been easy, but it's a gripping book. I could not put it down.
Thank you.
But reading it, you feel like, at least our government feels like the people who work with them, and we call it
Soft networks. Yeah. Yeah.
Are expendable. Okay. Why doesn't our government learn from Vietnam? And why wasn't there? Why? You know, I know you've studied this. What is keeping us from having a better system?
Could everybody hear the question? Okay, so the gist of the question is, why aren't we learning the lessons from the past, right? Why aren't we learning the lessons from Vietnam? Actually, and soft networks is a term that I use to describe not just interpreters, but any local nationals who work with us in conflict zones. And by virtue of that American affiliation that they gain, they become targets, right? And they're a soft network because they're soft targets. They're easy targets. They're not a U.S. embassy or an armored patrol of vehicles. Those are the hard targets for the enemy. And so the easy targets are the people you can follow their kids home from school and leave a death threat on their door. And so anyway, why are we not learning? Yeah, that was the burning issue I brought back from Iraq with me after I spent 40 months in Iraq and saw this just keep repeating itself. And so when I did that counterterrorism fellowship, I spent a year just thinking about this, publishing on it, writing. And one of the chapters in my thesis, I wrote on the American Revolution. And the reason I chose that was because this is not a new problem. It didn't start in Vietnam. It's not just counterinsurgency type of stuff. It's a strategic problem that will continue to play out, especially for any superpower, because our adversaries who are fighting from a position of weakness are going to target our soft networks. That's what we did to the British, the world superpower at the time. That's how we gained our independence. We very effectively targeted loyalists here in the colonies, and the British, to their credit, evacuated somewhere between 70 and 80,000 loyalists from the colonies at the end of the Revolutionary War. And so if you think about that at that time, that's a huge number. And that was some of the parliamentarians who were advocating that policy back in London basically were saying, you know, this is a way to withdraw with a bit of dignity from a strategic defeat. And those were the talking points that I was using to this administration, many of whom I've worked alongside of in my previous time in D.C. And it was amazingly frustrating not to be able to get, you know, the political decision early enough to really get ahead of this problem. But a lot of my research is in that space. It's taking best practices from, say, domestic programs like witness security. Most people call it witness protection. But we didn't have witness protection in the United States until 1972. And so it's a policy that we need here given a mature legal system. And so if we're in a conflict zone, we might want to think about what tools can we translate into that, very chaotic, dangerous environment in order to insulate our most trusted partners. And so anyway, I look at things like that. I look at things like the way the media operates in conflict zones, where if it's too dangerous for somebody who looks Western to go in there, a Western journalist, they hire, if you're talking Syria, they'll hire a Syrian journalist. And so they use those local national stringers, they call them, or fixers, the people who help the Western journalists get into whatever area they're trying to get to and navigate checkpoints and all the other dangers in the conflict zone. And when they become at risk, the media organizations figure out ways to get them out of harm's way. First, they mask their identity to begin with, and then they try to, relocate them if they need to. So it's, basic principles like that I think we're close. I was able to get a grant from the Smith-Richardson Foundation a few years ago, and we led a research and a policy development effort which has teed up a policy process for our government to pursue. And I hope in the next 6 months to a year we'll be able to drive that in a way that gets our government to just pause and think on this particular strategic challenge and implement some just basic principles and policy options that practitioners out on the ground can employ when they face this problem. But a lot of it's awareness, and it's not rocket science. It's pretty common sense once you realize our enemies are going to target these people. And if we know it, we should have a counter strategy. We shouldn't just go into it blind. Yes, ma'am. Great question. Yeah. So how were the interpreters and other people chosen in conflict zones? So the way the U.S. military goes to war nowadays is with defense contractors. And the contracting firms they do the vetting and the hiring of interpreters and other logistics support and all the other local national support that ties into the military bases and the other, whatever the footprint happens to be in theater. And so they do all of that vetting. It's a good question because if you're talking somebody that is applying for a special immigrant visa, they are the most highly vetted refugees of anybody anywhere in the world. They are getting polygraph, lie detector test every 6 months. They're getting interviewed by counterintelligence professionals, and that's the vetting process that continues. So, as I mentioned, these are people who went on patrol with me every day. I trusted them with my life. They slept on our bases 24/7 because it was too dangerous for them to commute back and forth to go home. They'd be killed. And so they'd go home usually once a month because in a cash-based society, you need to bring the money home to support the family. But that was how they lived. And many of them, Ronnie, one of the characters I talked about, he essentially, his entire adult life was in combat, working for the Americans, 6 years straight. I mean, at least I got a year in between my combat deployments, before I was going back, because it's an exhausting, time away from family and all that. So anyway, yes, sir.
Just to follow on that, so much energy labor goes into the defense contractors to figure out who these people are and they can be used by us. Why doesn't there be an exit plan by those defense contractors or another group of defense contractors to say, hey, these are the folks we can trust, develop a plan to get them out of here.
Yeah. So we've been working on this for a long time. Right now, the Department of Defense and the Department of State have a thing called Project Rabbit, which is an attempt to do exactly what you're alluding to. It's streamline the special immigrant visa process, because one of the biggest hurdles is one of the first things the interpreters need to do is they need to demonstrate honorable service via some sort of certificate or letter they got from the unit that they served with. They need to have just a lot of other paperwork in there, as well as from the defense contractor that they served with. Some of those contracting firms are no longer in business. So how do you get something from, an organization that's no longer around? Some of them intentionally destroyed the records for various reasons. There's a lot of liability issues at stake there. And so what Project Rabbit is attempting to do is use AI and some other things to get those documents for the interpreters on their behalf. So they don't need to track down, Sergeant so-and-so who wrote that letter for them or didn't write the letter, but they're asking him to write the letter and, help move the process along quicker. It's legally, Congress has mandated that our government needs to process the special immigrant visa within 9 months. Our government, every administration has failed. The average wait is 3 to 4 years. And when you're talking 3 to 4 years in a conflict zone, that's a really long time. And it creates a lot of hardship and a lot of hard feelings. And it creates a lot of anxiety in our veteran community. And one of the things that I end up talking to and I'll take maybe 1 or 2 questions more because I know we're getting a little late and some people want to talk about other things or get me to sign books and stuff too. So, but one of the things I talk to our legislators on Capitol Hill about is, this is a moral issue, absolutely, but it's not Mother Teresa foreign policy. There are real national security interests at stake. So when our interpreters who are in conflict zones elsewhere from Afghanistan see how we're treating the Afghans, that erodes the trust with our servicemen and women who are in those other areas right now. Anytime a bomb goes off anywhere in the world, we have FBI agents and other counterterrorism specialists. They're analyzing whether that's a trend we need to get on top of to determine whether it's coming to the United States and how do we protect the homeland better. Who's going to want to be an informant to our FBI if they see the way we're treating our most trusted, interpreters? And then lastly, you've got young men and women leaving their time in service, taking off their uniform, and they're feeling ashamed of our country because of that policy, and they're feeling like they violated an ethos that we inculcated in them during their time in service. And so I ask our members of Congress, is that how we want our young men and women to feel about our country when they're leaving? I don't think so, and I think we can do a better job. And so anyway, that's where a lot of my work is recommending policy that will allow us to get better at protecting our most trusted partners. Yes, sir?
Do you think the zombie apocalypse that you talked about, that whole experience of the withdrawal, will make it less likely for us to even enter a situation like that in the first place in the near future?
So the question, if everybody couldn't hear it, is, given the withdrawal from Afghanistan, will that make it less likely that we'll go into conflict zones in the future? I think that's the gist of the question. I think we go to war about every 10 to 20 years in our country. We've got a pretty good track record there, and then there's a lot of other low-burning forest fires going on that don't hit the news. We've got, right now, servicemen and women in about 100 different countries around the world. Most of it is very humanitarian in nature. We might be engineers or medical people doing inoculations and stuff like that. But we've got a lot of special operators out there working alongside host nation forces or not, and going after terrorist organizations and other nefarious actors. And so for a broader conflict like Iraq or Afghanistan, I think it's hard to say, but I would say, one of my students at Marine Corps University wrote his thesis on the cost of war, basically in terms of blood and treasure, and he was looking at case studies, and Vietnam was one of them. And at the end of the day, the question I asked him was, do you think that despite all the cost, despite the losses, that's going to inoculate whoever is at the head of our government from making a decision, that keeps us out of conflict? I think both administrations, the last one and this one, have indicated a desire to avoid those types of costs. But at the end of the day, there's a good argument to say we should have left those 2,500 soldiers there, kept Bagram Air Base open, and at least not allowed our defense contracting infrastructure to completely collapse and all of our NATO partners to withdraw with us. It probably could have saved a lot of lives. And so there's arguments both ways, but I'm not optimistic that we have learned our lesson. And I think in the next 10 to 20 years, the next generation is going to be at war. And it seems to be our way. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. Any other questions? We'll take one more question, or we can wrap it on that cheery, optimistic note. All right.
Well, thanks. First of all, let's thank Steve.
Thank you.
Mike, should be on, right? Yes. Yes, thank you for speaking with us, Steve, and for truth-telling about a difficult situation, even when it's not easy, and just for taking the time to be with us. Once again, Steve will be in the back for a bit, selling books, signing books. You can donate to, Veterans Arts Alliance?
U.S. Veteran Artists Alliance.
U.S. Veteran Artists Alliance.
It's at the back of the book. Describes it. Yeah.
So if you make a donation in the basket, that's where that will go. And coats are in the black bags in the back. Help yourself to snacks and waters in the back. Also, thank Joel Tumanaro for coming and providing us with some nice music before and afterwards. So he has an instrument called a handpan. You can ask him more about that if you want to find out. I'd just like to pray with us before we close this portion of our program. So let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for bringing us together on this evening. We thank you for Steve's being willing to travel here and speak with us and work on behalf of the vulnerable. We pray for him and his work. We pray for his safe travels as he continues to speak on these issues. We pray for the safety of the interpreters and the refugees who have already come here and those seeking to leave. And most of all, God, we pray for peace around the world, that you would inspire us with the heart of the Prince of Peace and help us to seek him and to see him in one another. All of this we pray in his name. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for coming.